On August 20th, 1992, former Forest Service ranger and avid outdoorsman Paul Freeman videotaped a Bigfoot in Oregon's Blue Mountains. The footage begins with Paul speaking on camera about the huge man-like tracks he's been following in the mud, just before he spots one striding into view about 50 yards ahead. This video is my full interview with Paul's son, Michael, who's been working on a book about his father's Bigfoot research. The book will be available in September, just after the 30th anniversary of the date his father's incredible footage was taken. All right, so we're here with Michael Freeman, son of Paul Freeman, who shot the very well-known or somewhat well-known Bigfoot footage in the Blue Mountains, I believe.
That is correct.
In the Washington area. And Michael has a new book coming out about his father. And this interview came about because I've always been interested in the Freeman footage, and it's just never been as well known as the Patterson Gimlin footage, but I think it's just as compelling and convincing. So I stumbled upon Michael's information, contact information, reached out, and here we are. So I want to turn it over to you, Michael, and just, tell me a little bit about yourself and your relationship to your father.
Yeah, absolutely. My name is Michael Freeman, and Paul Freeman's my father. I currently live in Spokane, Washington. I'm from Walla Walla, Washington, of course, which is close to where all this research was taking place in the Blue Mountains. I've got three kids, and I'm a gymnastics coach here in Spokane. I've been doing that for over 20 years. I'm not what you would call an active Bigfoot researcher, but I am more of a historian on the Blue Mountain evidence, and I suppose the foremost expert on my father. So, you know, but yeah, I'm the youngest child, actually, of my mom and dad. I have an older brother who is almost 12 years older than me. And I have an older sister as well that recently passed away in June in a motorcycle accident. But I'm the youngest child, and I was 5 years old when my dad first got involved in Bigfoot.
Okay. Um, Tell me what he was doing at that time. Like, what was his job? What were your life circumstances? Was this the first time he had had an experience, or were there things leading up to that? Where was he in life?
Yeah, well, we actually had just moved to Milton Freewater, Oregon. We had been previously living in Camas, Washington, and my dad got a new job, and that job was with the Forestry Service. And so we moved to Milton Freewater, Oregon, and that's just across the border. It's just south of Walla Walla, Washington. They're actually pretty much connected towns at this point in time. But back then, there was a little distance in between. So my dad was working for the Forest Service. He was a boundary patrolman, and he was responsible for about 25 square miles of the watershed, just making sure people stayed out of it. No one was poaching, getting counts on, game head, stuff like that. Looking for any trouble. That was his daily duty, was to drive his service vehicle around. He could get out and walk if he wanted to. If he had to check something out, he could write tickets. If people were in the watershed or they were driving on the wrong side of the road, stuff like that. And my dad, he was actually a meat cutter by trade, and he worked in the union at Fred Meyer for years. In Vancouver, Washington. But his dream job was the Forest Service. He grew up in the mountains. He was a hunter. He was a trapper. He was a tracker. He loved being in the mountains. There's no place he'd rather be. And so when he applied for this job and it got offered to him, it was a no-brainer. We packed up. We moved to Milton Freewater, Oregon. And my dad had only been on the job for about 2 months, actually. He was in his service vehicle, and this was June 10th, 1982. He was driving up a road called Tiger Canyon Road, and he noticed that there was some elk that had come across the road, and they were moving quite quickly. And he had been told by one of the biologists from the Forest Service that they wanted to keep a head count on calves. And so he thought, he'd follow this herd and see if there was any calves in the group. And they had gone down and across this old logging road, and they had some deadfall in it, so he couldn't drive his truck in there, so he had to park. And he got out and he walked down this old logging spur, and it was about 3/4 of a mile he was walking when he started to notice something smelled strange. He compares it to a dead body mixed with urine, kind of a dead, decaying, but musky smell. Um, he would say that he wanted to turn his head away from it because it was bothersome, but it wasn't overly surprising. And there's a couple of reasons for that. Number one, the previous spring, there had been a boy that had gone missing from a family picnic in the area. And so initial thoughts may have been that he was coming up on the decomposing body. The snowfall was starting to thaw out. I think it was about 70 degrees at that time up there in that area in early June. And so it would have been just about right for that. And of course, the second thought he had was there was something else that may have been dead, that the forest hadn't taken care of yet. It hadn't been discarded of or moved away or eaten up. So it wasn't shocking to him, although it was different. He would tell you, but he kept going nonetheless, and he just crested a hill in the road when he just happened to look up from looking down where he was walking, and there was this, in his own words, he calls it a critter. There was this critter that was on the hill, that was coming down off the hill onto the logging road. And he says it stepped 10 feet, one step, and then off onto the road. They noticed each other about the same time. It stopped and looked at him. And he, very descriptive. My dad said he could see its stomach muscles moving and its chest moving in and out from where it was breathing. He said that's kind of like a dog or other animals will do, where they can make their fur stand up. Like the hair on its neck and its shoulders kind of went on end, and a little bit on its head, and it made like a low guttural kind of growl a little bit. And my dad stepped back. He'd never seen anything like this. And about that time, it took off and it kept walking again. And he actually watched it walk about, I think the estimate is 200 to 300 yards. And it stopped a couple times to look back at him, presumably to see what he was doing or make sure he wasn't following it. One thing he will point out in the course of those 200 or 300 yards is that its knees never straightened out. It walked with bent knees, had very long arms. And as he has famously said, the first thought that crossed his mind was not of an ape, but of a prehistoric man.
Mm.
And it's the first thing that he thought of. Anyway, it went up over a hill about 300 yards away, disappeared into the forest. And my dad was so shook up that he hooked his heel on a rock going backward and fell down, dropped his keys in the road, and had to fish for those and find those and make his way back to his service vehicle. So that's how he got started in Bigfoot. Now that was the first sighting. Interesting to note, though, that before this incident, he was not a believer in Bigfoot. He actually
Mm-hmm.
made fun of people that believed in Bigfoot. He thought they were
Mm-hmm.
stories for, crazy old drunk people, or, these old cowboys that fell off their horses too many times, something like that. He'd been in the woods hunting his whole life. He'd seen everything there was. He'd never seen anything that was like this. He didn't believe in anything like this. So a skeptic becomes, an instant believer.
How old were you when this happened in 82?
I was 5 years old.
And did he tell you and the family about this experience?
Yeah, I mean, we knew about it right away. You know, actually, what happened is he made it back to his service vehicle, went to one of the ranger cabins, and he was able to call in to his superiors. And they came out to check out the scene. You know, he was sent home later that day. We knew about it, and my brother, who's about 12 years older than me, my brother Dwayne, has better memories of that time period. I mean, I was only 5, so the memories I have of that incident are kind of fleeting a little bit. Helped out, of course, by media and newspapers and pictures. And I feel like I have a really good memory and grasp of it now. But I think at the time I wasn't super aware. of what was
Hmm.
going on with that. But I do remember lots of people being at the house. And I
So he went
remember,
public with it.
newspapers. And I can vividly remember Renee DeHinden being at the house because he's such a distinctive person and his voice is so distinctive, you know. And I vividly remember Grover Krantz as well being at the
Hmm.
house and the cloud of smoke that was always around him because, he was 5 pack a day smoker or whatever it was, but no, I was 5 years old. So, as any 5 year old, my actual memories of that are probably not as strong as what I built with information since then.
Okay, so he did take it public when this happened. He went to the local paper, or how did he report the sighting?
Yeah, he went to the local paper. It got reported. There was a couple articles in the paper. Vance Orchard wrote one of the original articles. The forestry department is kind of wishy-washy on this situation. They did try to discredit him, you know,
Hmm.
and I can't think of the gentleman's name off the top of my head, and I should know it. But there was a man in Wyoming that was a Forest Service ranger that had a sighting as well. And he was threatened to be fired from the Forest Service for even talking about Bigfoot. And my dad kind of went through a similar situation where he was kind of told to be quiet.
Hmm.
This is what we're going to say. You're not going to speak out against this. He was demoted to a desk job, so he was not allowed to patrol anymore. But I will say that his direct superior was a man by the name of Wayne Long, and Wayne Long was there. He came in for the initial investigation after my dad called in his sighting that day, and it is reported that Wayne Long made a note that even my dad, at 270 pounds, barely made an indention in the soil next to the prints that they found that they were able to
Hmm.
cast.
So they did find physical evidence that day.
Yes, there were prints taken that day. There was a print taken across the road. There was also a print taken out of a drainage ditch as well.
Amazing. That is fascinating. So this must have changed his life. Um, I assume he became very interested or obsessed with Bigfoot after this incident.
Yes, so it did change his life. Now, what changed his life even more is what happened 6 days later. So we're not done with exactly that part of it because that's June 10th, 1982, and 6 days later he is in the paper again because he's with a fellow employee, a man by the name of Bill Epic, and they're at a place called Elk Wallow, which is at the bottom of Low Canyon in the watershed, and they both stumble across new tracks. And this was June 16th, 1982. And what they end up finding are two different sets of tracks, two different individuals. Now, after investigation is done, these are the tracks that Grover Krantz has actually called in to take a look at in the plaster casts. It's determined that the first set of tracks belong to the individual Sasquatch that my dad saw on June 10th. They match. The second set of tracks at Elk Wallow are from a different animal, and that's where you get what is called the Paul Freeman dermals. And if you haven't studied those, you should take a look in Grover Krantz's book. They're in both his editions. They're also in Jeff Meldrum's book. But those have high quality dermal ridges that are visible on them and skin striations. And actually, Grover Krantz took those to the Smithsonian Institution. They're still there to this day, the original copies of those.
Wow.
So that's what really set my dad off was the finding of the second set of tracks and the dermals because they were just so good. And Grover Krantz, raved about them, and he took them to the University of British Columbia, and he took them to the Smithsonian. And Krantz was telling everybody that this, could be irrefutable proof of the existence, and these are completely unfakeable. Also, with those dermals, there were over 40 forensic and FBI experts that examined those,
Wow.
with mostly positive to neutral comments is what you get out of those. One expert even going as far as to say he can't believe this is real. He can't even speak on the implications of what this means.
That's incredible. And I do have a copy of Grover Krantz's book
Yeah.
in my
And
files
I
here.
actually brought in if you can see here.
Oh, wow.
This is the right foot dermal cast that was taken at Elk Wallow on June 16th. I don't know how well it's going to come across on the camera with being all white, but this is the right foot. As you can see, it is not one of those cookie cutter type footprints that you see that
Mm-hmm.
all look the same, like somebody was standing statically in the sand. It was through wet mud. It shows motion. It has toe splay to it, but the substrate was fine enough that it was able to pick up the dermal ridges, and those are something that would be. I don't even know how somebody actually would hoax dermal ridges. It would be incredibly difficult.
Right, right. Unbelievable. Um, Tell me about, since that was 82, tell me about the period between that and the filming in 1994.
Okay.
That's a long stretch, so I'm just wondering
Yeah.
in broad strokes what his activity was.
Let me clear up real quick for you. The filming was in 1992.
Oh, apologies, 92.
August 20th, 1992. No, you don't need to apologize. It's a common mistake. And it's made because there is a version of the film or two on YouTube that have a copyright stamp on them that says 1994. That is incorrect.
Mm-hmm.
And it's posted up on YouTube. And so people see that and they think it was 94. It has an incorrect stamp on it. It's actually 92. But getting back to your question, yeah, we actually moved shortly after the dermal prints were found at Elk Wallow. So there was some ridicule going on. There was, the Forestry Service was trying to discredit him. The newspapers were kind of being, satirical, with him. We had some crank phone calls. There were uh, some slight vandalism that happened to our house. It was a small town in the early 80s, and he was all of a sudden kind of either considered the crazy guy or he was a liar. He was actually accused, the Forest Service accused him of being drunk. And my dad was not an everyday drinker, that type of person. So we ended up moving, and my grandma, my mother's mom, had died during this time period, and she left her house to my mom. And that was back in Camas, Washington. And so it was a really good excuse, I think. And I don't think my mom wanted to hang around with being married to the town crazy guy and having this media and all that. So we moved back to Camas, Washington. And that's actually where I started kindergarten. And my parents opened a deli and a smoked meat shop, you know, and my dad kept going back. He saw something and he couldn't stay away. And I was too young at the time, I think, to really realize what was happening. I thought he was just working, but he was going back for like a week at a time, or on the weekends. He was going back, and he was coming up to the Blue Mountain area in Washington and Oregon, and he was doing research, and he was doing all that. And it just got to a point, I think, where he couldn't stay away, and he ended up convincing my mom to sell that house, and they sold their business, and we moved back, and we moved back to Walla Walla in the summer of 1986. And I started third grade there that year, and his research continued, from that point, and it picked up. In 1987, Good Morning America happened.
Mm-hmm.
If you're not familiar with Good Morning America, or anyone that's going to view this, if you're not familiar with Good Morning America, I like to call it the Good Morning Hatchet job.
Mm-hmm.
They did a piece on Bigfoot with my father and Wes Summerlin and Renee DeHinden in 1987, and it was a piece of satire, to be honest. They
Mm-hmm.
were making fun of Bigfooters, and two cowboys and a Canuck fell for it. And my dad doomed himself by honestly answering a simple question that he was asked. The interviewer asked him if he had ever made fake footprints. And my dad answered, yes, I've made fake footprints. I've made some in my garden at home. And I've tried to replicate the footprints in the cast that I'm finding because I want to see if a man is doing this. And I think if you're a smart person, especially on the scientific side, the first thing you have to do is eliminate any possibility of something being fake before you can accept that it's a possibility of being real. And that's what the skeptics, want to do. And I think that's the way you have to do it. You have to be skeptical. And that's what my dad was doing. He was trying to clear out, any possibility of being hoaxed. Is somebody fooling me? Okay. So he gets asked this question on Good Morning America. Have you made fake tracks? He answers basically saying what I just said with the story. And when they air it on TV, all you hear him say is, yes, I made fake tracks.
Mm.
And then they cut it off. And that is a black cloud that follows his name to this day. People will say, oh, Paul Freeman's a hoaxer. He admitted it on Good Morning America. Well, that's not true. And I
Mm-hmm.
would really like everyone to realize that that's not true. And that I was there when that was recorded. And a gentleman named Jonathan Summerlin, who's Wes Summerlin's grandson, was there when that was recorded. And he remembers that as well. Cliff Barrickman knows the truth on that. Jeff Meldrum knows the truth. Doug Hycheck knows the truth. Anyone worth their salt whatsoever has, number one, done the same thing. Cliff will tell you he's done the same thing. Jeff
Right.
Meldrum has done the same thing. They just, didn't get sabotaged on TV.
I
I
understand
just want to
how.
clear that up because that's one of the big things that follows his name around.
No, that's great. And as soon as you started to tell the story, I understand it's almost like a process of elimination that he would want to do, or anybody with a kind of looking at it scientifically or from a biological standpoint, like can this be done, wanting to sort of test it theoretically, so I get why he would do that and how the show, kind of zapped him or kind of it was kind of like a gotcha kind of thing.
Oh yeah, exactly. Yeah, and
Yeah,
if you've never seen it, you should YouTube it or look it up. It's not even done well.
yeah,
I mean, they didn't even do a good job of it, but it was a total setup, But yeah, I know other researchers, and Cliff Barrickman will tell you he did the same thing. There was actually a set of tracks that he thought were real that he found out over some time that they weren't real. He got fooled, and so
mm,
he actually made his own like fake tracks to try to replicate what he was seeing that made him believe that these things were real. And so, other people have done this as well. It's just my dad's kind of maybe the first one that admitted to doing it. And whether or not he should have ever said that, I'm not going to argue that. He was trying to be transparent and honest. And it
right.
bit him, it bit him right in the ass. And then people still, use that to this day, but, you know, I guess getting back to your original question, sorry if I'm being long winded a little bit
No,
here,
not at all. It's great.
but that was 87. And then, you go up and there's, you know, good trackways in 87. Fantastic. There are fantastic trackways in 1991. You get the Mill Creek Road trackway, which is one of the most impressive things you would ever see. My dad's quote was, it was the doggonest thing he'd ever seen in his life. And that's over the sighting, was the Mill Creek Road trackway. A gentleman named Greg May, who was a survival expert tracker and a wilderness survival instructor from Washington State University, tracked those through wet, muddy wheat fields for 8 miles of uninterrupted tracks.
Wow.
5,000 sets of footprints is what he estimated that at. Through uphill, downhill, over 2 barbed wire fences, down by a river, back up again, and eventually into higher rocky terrain where they faded out. But 8 miles of tracks in wet, muddy wheat fields, super impressive. Longest trackway I've ever heard of, actually.
Incredible.
And those were cast as well by numerous individuals. My dad, David Bean, Bill Lowry, Wes Summerlin, Vance Orchard, Dar Addington, Grover Krantz, John Green, and Bob Titmus came to see those as well. Super, super impressive. And what actually happened with those was my dad was having coffee with my mother, overheard two gentlemen talking about seeing bear tracks. And this was January 14th, 1991. He thought it was a little early for bear, asked them where the location was. They told him. He called up Wes Summerlin and Vance Orchard. They all three went out there together to see the tracks and realized they were not bear tracks. They were Bigfoot tracks. And as told in one of Vance Orchard's books, Wes Summerlin actually immediately recognized the track from an
Mm.
individual that he had seen before, had made prints of, and had seen tracks of on multiple occasions. That individual is named Big Jim. And if you're interested, I have here a copy of Big Jim. This is from the 1991 Mill Creek Road tracks.
Unbelievable.
Now, as you will see, Big Jim is only about 13 and a half inches and about 5 inches wide. Big Jim's not so big. We can get into that in a little bit, though, because I'll tell you why Big Jim's not so big. But that's the individual that's found there. This individual, Sasquatch, will be cast again the next year in 1992 at a place called Deduck Spring, Oregon, when my father takes his video. This is the same Bigfoot that is in the video.
Incredible.
This is also the same Bigfoot that Jeff Meldrum cast in 1996 at a place called Five Points outside of Walla Walla, Washington. And it's the set of prints that Meldrum kind of got famous for. Same Bigfoot. All the tracks, you can match them up. They have distinct anatomical characteristics that we can match them to one another. And we know it's the same individual, but it is the one that is in the video as well. And what I can tell you about this one, even though it's referred to as Big Jim, is that we have casts of this individual for about 10 years time period at least. And the size of the foot never changes. Within a half inch, it's 13 to 13 and a half inches, up to 14 if there's any toe slide or in the mud, something like that. So we can assume that it is fully grown. And at that point, it would put 13 and a half inch track as a female. So Big Jim is more like Big Jill.
Wow.
Which is like,
Incredible.
I usually refer to her as female number 2 from the area because there is a female number 1. But Big Jill is the other name I have for her instead of Big Jim. And she is the animal that is filmed in my dad's footage.
Here we go. Part 2. Okay, we're back with Michael Freeman, son of Paul Freeman, Bigfoot researcher, who's no longer with us, but will live on forever in his incredible footage. So we're at that point, Michael, in your father's story where the day of the filming, and what was that date exactly? I know you said it was 1992.
Yeah, the film was captured August 20th, 1992. So in a couple weeks here, it will be the 30th anniversary of that footage.
My son's birthday. Incredible. So tell me about what led up to that day. And everybody has seen in this video, I'm going to show the Freeman footage up front, but it is incredible, compelling footage. And I'm just wondering, what led up to that. Obviously, we've been talking a lot about your father's history. It wasn't like he had just stumbled on a sighting that day. There was a lot that led up to that. So tell me about like what happened that day.
Yeah, it's there's a lot of work that led up to that actually. And Deduck Spring, where the video is taken, is kind of a hotspot of activity for Bigfoot in the area. It had been for years. There have been casts taken there before. Wes Summerlin has a handprint that was taken from there. Lots of casts, lots of activities going on. That particular summer was real hot and dry, and a lot of the water sources had started to dry up a little bit by mid to late August. But my dad knew that Deduck Spring was still a viable source that all kinds of animals were using, all kinds of game. And he knew that the Bigfoot were there as well.
How do you
They were
spell
going to come
that?
there and they were going to get water. What's that?
How do you spell that, Michael? Deduck Spring.
Deduct.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah. And so he knew that the Bigfoot were going to be coming to Deduct, and he had spent a lot of time that summer out there. And he had been filming already as well. I don't think people realize that I have hours of video footage that he would film, just pouring plaster in tracks or looking at trackways with Wes or Bill or Dave or one of those guys and talking about them and pointing the camera into the watershed and pointing out where his original sighting was, or just filming whatever, just wildlife, my dog running around out there. He had the camera with him all the time. By this point in time, it was 10 years since his original sighting, and he was out to get proof, and he carried that video camera with him constantly. He had rented cameras, and it was becoming too expensive And then my uncle Larry gave him one. And from the time he got that, he would carry it with him, and he would actually use the same tapes over and over because we couldn't afford to buy brand new tapes. And so a lot of the tapes I have are, it'll be something and then it gets cut off and something else is there. And interesting side note, my nephew's second birthday party is what was filmed over to get the footage at Deduct. just so you know how important, Bigfoot was at the time. But, back to the story. So a couple weeks before he actually got the footage, he had started going up there on a regular basis, 3, 4, sometimes 5 times a week in that 2-week period. And he was going very early in the morning before the sun came up. And my dad was working a night shift at that point in time. And he was getting off work about 4 a.m. And then he would just immediately go to Deduct. And he would look for sign. He would look to see if there was any fresh prints, any disturbances along the edge of the pond, anything like that. And he knew they were coming there. They had to be coming there. And they'd found signs of them before. And my dad actually, who was a great tracker and a great hunter, had it in his brain that they were coming before he was there. They were getting water and they were leaving. And I think anyone probably would have that same assumption. They would come under the cover of darkness. They wouldn't come during the daytime hours. And he was wrong. So, and we find out he was wrong by a bit of chance actually taking place. And Wednesday, August 19th, 1992, the day before he got the footage, that evening before he went to work, he got a phone call from my sister and her car wouldn't start. And she asked Dad if he would come over the next morning and fix her car so she could get to work and get my nephew to daycare. And my dad, being dad, said, yeah, sure, why not? I'll come help you, And so he went to work and he got off work and he went home and he went to sleep. And he had no plans to go to Deduct that day. And he got up in the morning and got his cup of coffee. And he went to my sister's house and he fixed her car. And he was driving home, and halfway home, he stopped for whatever reason. And he said, well, what the hell? I'll go up there. Maybe I'll find some footprints. I don't have anything else to do today anyway. It's just a bit of chance, where else would he rather be? And so he goes up and he gets there around 9:30 a.m., which is, about 3 hours or so later than he would have gotten there. And the first thing he notices is that there are indeed tracks on the road that run past the east side of the pond, running north. And he starts to film those with his video camera, and he walks right up on one. He was not there that morning. And I am sure, the one thing I am sure of is they weren't coming before him. They were already there. Mm-hmm. They were watching him. And when he was leaving, they were going to the pond and they were getting their water. And that day when he didn't show up, they made a mistake and he was able to walk right out, onto one of them. And I do say they, because if you watch the master or the full video, there's a point in there where my dad makes a comment that there's 2 of them.
Right.
We are not entirely sure that is correct, actually. There is a possibility that he lost one. The one that walks in front of the camera is the only one there. And that when he's followed on the trail, it pops out in a different location than where he thought it went. And he thinks that it's a second one. I think that's kind of where we're at right now, but that doesn't rule out the possibility of there being 2. And also, we are working right now on video enhancements of that to bring the best possible version of that film that anyone's ever seen. And there might be a little surprise in that video enhancement for some people to see. So I'm kind of excited to get that out. Not going to talk maybe too much about it right now because it's not done. But there has been a rumor surrounding that video for about 20 years that there might be something else there. And we're getting close to possibly being able to prove that that is correct.
Incredible. It sounds like how far is this location from civilization at the time? Was this a place your father had to drive really far to get to, up the mountains? Like how
Yeah,
remote was it?
it's a good drive outside of Walla Walla. I mean, you're looking at, mountain roads. I mean, over an hour and a half
Hour and a half.
probably,
Wow.
and
Okay.
it's um usually not even accessible to about like June, sometimes July because of the snow. I
Hmm.
think this year it was close to the middle of July before anybody could even get in there because there were still 5 foot snow drifts across the road. It's pretty inaccessible. It's a remote part of the Blue Mountains in Oregon, uh, close to Washington, but it is in Oregon, and it's a good little drive. It hasn't changed much. There's a public restroom they put in there now, a very nice one I've heard. But if you were to go there, and I just Cliff Barrickman was just actually there the other day. So was a gentleman named Daniel Perez,
Hmm.
that you may know. He's in California, I believe, and does the Bigfoot Times newsletter. He was just there last week. They both sent me pictures of the quote unquote Christmas tree that the individual Bigfoot walks in front of and brushes against
Hmm.
in the video. And although it is much larger, it's nothing's changed. You can immediately tell what you're looking at.
Is
So
that still known as a squatchy area?
it is, yeah. They get reports still in the Blue Mountains. They still find tracks. They still find prints. Jonathan Summerlin's kind of the go-to guy down there right now, keeping his grandfather's research alive. He finds prints. It's not what you would call the hot spot of activity that maybe it used to be. But a lot of that can also be, well, there's a couple of factors that could lead to that. But one is that, the guys that were there, like my dad and Wes and Bill Lowry and those guys that were keeping it active in the public eye, they're not around anymore. They're all dead. Dar Addington is the only one of them that's still alive, and she still lives, in Walla Walla. And if you're not familiar, she was Dar Glasgow at the time. So Dar Glasgow Addington is what she goes by now. If you're not familiar with her name, everyone watching this should be a true pioneer, a female researcher in the
Mhm.
90s that worked alongside my dad and Wes Summerlin, something that was kind of unheard of at the time. And she's responsible for some fantastic casts and tracks. And she's also one of the people that you will be able to read a chapter from in the book that I'm doing. She has been invited to participate in that. But her name should be more well known than it is, for sure.
Incredible. Um, Tell me about the book. That's actually a good segue into the book itself. I was wondering how that came about, and was that something that you had kind of prompted, or was it you and some other researchers? Was that you and Cliff Brockman? Who exactly? What was the catalyst for the book? Which again, I
Well,
kind of stumbled on by
it's
coincidence.
something I've been thinking about for a long time. It's something that I actually tried to do kind of in 2016, and it fell apart. I just couldn't get the right partners on it, the right backing to be able to go ahead and do it. And then it just kind of went away, and I had actually asked, Cliff Barrickman if it's something that, he would be interested in doing with me because, he has the public eye and he's kind of the celebrity in the face, of that stuff. And, Cliff's a friend first and foremost. And we had a conversation and we kind of both decided that, well, maybe we shouldn't do that together because we're friends and you know how business can go from time to time,
Yep.
um, but I was approached by Doug Hychek, and Doug Hychek is he owns White Wolf Entertainment and Hanger One Publishing. He's also the producer and creator of Monster Quest. He also did the Sasquatch Legend Meets Science DVD feature. He does a ton of other shows, but he was a friend of my father's, and my dad actually helped him out a little bit when he was kind of getting started in this, with the footage from Deduct, and let him use that for a few things. And they developed a relationship, and he was very fond of my dad as well. And he reached out to me and he said, "Hey, let's do it. Let's do this. I want to help you do it." And I said, "Sure, let's do it." And then, people like Cliff Barrickman, have joined in to help out with that. So he's helping with the book still, but not doing business together with the book. That type of situation. Jeff Meldrum, reached out and said, "Hey, I'll do this as well." We have Tom Powell from Portland, Oregon, Dar Glasgow Addington that I mentioned, Jonathan Summerlin as well. And Doug Hychek is also doing a chapter on that. And he also happens to be the person that's doing enhancements on the video. Mr. Hychek has actually been working on the video for 20 years.
Wow.
I mean, if you can believe it or not.
That's
And I think
patience.
technology is finally catching up to us to where it's actually going to help us, I think, to do some of this stuff with the video. And as I'd mentioned before there, and I can go ahead and talk about a little bit if you don't mind, something we're trying to do. But, there's been some rumors, and I don't know if you've heard before, but there's a rumor that, the Sasquatch in my dad's video could be pregnant
Mm.
because of the shape of her abdomen, the size of that, or that she could be recently postpartum. And that's been floating around, for a long time. There is
Interesting.
also a rumor that in part of the footage there you can see a baby,
Mm.
and that she actually picks the baby up from a tree. I don't know if you've ever heard this or looked
Yes,
into
I
this.
have. I
So
can't see it in the footage
here's what I
though.
can tell you. Here's what I'm going to tell you is that with the enhancements we've got right now, and the last thing that I have seen, the possibility of that actually being a baby that she picks up out of the tree grows more and more likely every day.
Wow.
Every time I see an enhancement of that footage, it's to the point where you're looking at it, you can clearly see a leg and a foot and possibly its head go on her shoulder.
Hmm.
Now, with that being said, that's what we're expecting to see because we're looking at it. And so people that don't know what it is, maybe they might view that differently. So I'm not saying it's 100% positive. I'm just saying that the likelihood grows stronger every day with every technical enhancement that we're able to do on that film. We're also trying to work on getting some medical, people, obstetricians to take a look at the animal in the video and from what they know compared to, let's say, apes, orangutan, or gorillas, tell us with measurements if they think that she could possibly be pregnant or postpartum, like just recently. And so we're looking to get some measurements on that, create a 3D model. We have lots of things going on right now with the footage. And if there is a baby in that and it's something that can be proved, and Doug Hychek is 100% convinced that that's what we're looking at, and he's trying to do it. It's going to be a game changer. That is going to be, the first time we've had something like that on film. So then we might be, up there with Patterson, maybe just a little bit, higher than we were before.
Right, right. I would love to see. Not, I wish the book obviously great success. I would love to see a special on your father, some sort of TV. I don't know, some sort of special edition or something to really showcase the footage. I don't know if anything like that is in the works or if you can talk about it, but that would, I think that would be incredible.
Well, right now what we have is the book, and we have an episode of a show on the History Channel that's going to come out here in a couple months that gets into the footage.
Oh, excellent.
And I gave an interview for that, Cliff Bergman as well, some things like that. Right now, as we speak, there's a Japanese film company that's doing a documentary on my father to be released in Japan. Apparently, Bigfoot is quite popular there. It is something that they enjoy. So we're dealing with that as well. I don't know. In regards to turning the book into like some type of documentary or something like that, nothing in the works right now. I mean, obviously, we're just going to have to see how the book does first and foremost. And if
Right,
it
right.
totally bombs out, then we're not going to do anything like that. But I put the book together, and it says, by Michael Freeman. I'm credited as the author. Everyone's going to say I wrote this book, but it's more of a book that I put together than I wrote. And I want
Mm.
everyone to understand that it's not a 300-page novel, and it's not your typical Bigfoot book that you've gotten that is 300 or 400 pages of all this stuff and then some black and white photos. That is not what we're doing. Okay. So what we are doing is a large coffee table style book that will have full color and in a lot of cases full page size photographs of my father's evidence, prints, casts, hair samples, other evidence as well that you will see in there. And we're going to have over 100 photos from my father's personal photo albums. And most of these no one's ever seen before. We're also going to have over an hour of audio recordings that are included with the book from my father's personal audio journal that he recorded because he was going to write a book at some point, which he never got to do before he died. And so I am using those as well. I'm not using all of it. There's 6 or 7 hours. And of course, we have constraints on size and time and stuff like that. So it's going to be somewhere over an hour of audio recordings that no one has ever heard. These are something I actually just found not that too long ago in a box. And then we also have footage, new enhancements of the Freeman film, and never before seen footage that he also recorded. As I was talking earlier, we have hours of footage that you're going to be able to see of just him doing research and talking to other people and other footage that he made. All these things are going to be included in the book directly in the pages via scannable QR codes. So as you're reading the book, and I wrote some chapters for the book. So it's not like, we did write, and Cliff Barrickman has written a chapter. Jeff Meldrum has written a chapter. John Summerlin, Tom Powell, Dar Addington has written a chapter. I have written a couple chapters. And as you're reading the book, you will come across like the QR code, and you just take your smartphone and hold it over that, and it's going to pull up the Freeman footage so you can see it, or it's going to pull up the audio and you're going to hear my dad talk about what you're reading me talk about in his own words, along with, all these photographs we've never seen. And the same for the other video footage. It'll be a QR code and you just pull it up and you can watch it right there on your smartphone. So we're going to allow you to do all these things right from the page. So it's more than your typical book. There's nothing has ever been done like this, especially on the subject of Bigfoot. I truly believe it's going to be the most dynamic book on Bigfoot that anyone's ever seen. If nothing else, it's going to be super cool, but there's also going to be a lot of really good information from a lot of really good people in there. And we're going to make comparisons to tracks and casts and show you how we make this comparison and say, we know that this animal is the one that's in the video, and we know that this animal is this other one. It's going to be good. And the other thing is, it's also going to be the story of a man, because a lot of what I've written is personal, and what it was like to grow up with my dad, and how it felt to be me as well. And my father's health decline is something that's dealt with in the book. So maybe the hardcore Bigfoot researchers and the science guys will find something to enjoy, and the people that are more novice, that are interested in a good story as well, will find something to enjoy, and hopefully everybody can meet in the middle, and it satisfies everyone. So
it sounds unbelievable, and you could sign me up to buy a copy for sure.
Well, man, I got one shot to do it right for my dad, and I hope it's unbelievable. I'm the one that really hopes that. So, right now, if everything goes smoothly, we're looking at probably before the end of September releasing that. We'll have pre-order information available first. To be honest with you, right now today, we're still working on some video footage. Everything that's written is done, but we're still trying to do some enhancements on some of this stuff, because we're going to put that right in the book. And even things like this baby, we're going to show the world this is what we think, and this is what we're looking at, and you judge for yourself. I not to give anything away, any secrets, but and there's a section of the book where I tell people everyone's entitled to their own opinion. Judge for yourself. Look at the evidence that's here, and you tell me what you think. So hopefully it at least sparks some people to have an open mind and consider some of that.
It sounds incredible, and I love the multimedia sort of angle to it as well, with the scannable codes and all the audio and video that will be a part of it. It makes it much more than all the books that the researchers have read so far, where, like you said, oh, some black and white photos of casts and like 300 pages of dermal ridges and whatnot. So, and I
Yeah, right.
also,
300 pages of close-ups of dermal ridges on black and white grainy paper, right? Okay,
yeah,
you got to get, your magnifying glass out. No, we're going for a different angle. We are going for something bold, and something that, like I said, is educational, but we also want it to be an entertaining experience.
hmm,
And so it's not just reading, but it's listening, it's viewing, and it's like kind of a whole entertainment package, and something that you can go through more than one time is kind of what, is kind of what we're going for. And so, like I said earlier, a lot of the book is photographs and audio and video, and it's not going to be 300 pages of written prose, you know.
hmm,
So, I think we're looking at maybe 100 pages, maybe, of written prose,
hmm,
like all together from everybody. But that's
hmm,
that's not going to be, encompass the heart of it, because, like I said, my dad intended to write a book. That's what he did these audio recordings for. And so, in a way, it is his book, and that's why I want to use his voice in there. And you're going to read what we all wrote, but you're also going to listen to him tell
yeah.
his own story, in the book in his own voice.
I think it's incredible that he had the foresight to be such a good archivist of this material in both audio, video. He was really out of his time in that respect, and that he took the research seriously enough that he realized he had to start documenting that.
Well, yeah, he my dad actually documented evidence very well for his time period. So I will give him credit for that. But actually, the person that deserves credit for that is my mother.
Mm,
And her name is Nancy Freeman, and my mother documented almost every single piece of evidence that he ever found. Every picture
wow.
you look at, that has writing on the back is her handwriting. She set up poster boards for him for displays. She typed every letter of correspondence. She cataloged everything in photo albums. She worked tirelessly. And so, although my dad was good at documenting evidence and he wanted it done, it really was my mom that actually made it happen. And if it wasn't for her, we have hundreds of photographs, hundreds. If it wasn't for her, we wouldn't even know what half of them were,
Sounds like
because
he
I mean, sometimes the terrain looks the same, or, like I said earlier, the tracks are similar because we can compare tracks and casts and we know which individuals are which. It's all on the toes, if you didn't know that. But
mhm.
so if they're the same animal and they're 2 months apart, but it's in an area that's similar, we may not know they're different because everything like looks so similar. So if it wasn't for my mother, she deserves a lot of credit for documenting. I always want to tell everyone that. And I don't even know if you can see it, but this is the master film. This is the deduct video. And
Wow.
that is my mother's handwriting right there,
That's
letting us
incredible.
know like what this one is. But this is there's Bigfoot history right there. There's the deduct spring master footage. If anyone wants to know where it is, right
There it
here.
is.
So, but brought that out to show today for you. Yeah, and I just want to, you know, Bigfoot is one thing, man. It's like you believe or you don't believe, or maybe you believe but you're kind of skeptical, or maybe you want solid proof, or maybe you're Joe Rogan and you used to believe but you don't believe now, because you talked to someone and they convinced you. But I'm not out to change anybody's mind whatsoever. Everyone's entitled to their own opinion. Everyone's entitled to believe what they are. If you think they're aliens from space, or you're Eric Beckard and you think they're 800-pound robots that were sent here from aliens from another planet, whatever, I don't care. My dad didn't care. He
Hmm.
was friends with that guy and they had totally different views, but personally they got along. And they have a common goal. And the common goal is to prove the existence of Sasquatch, you know?
Yeah.
And I think something that gets lost on a lot of people, and I always try to tell it doesn't necessarily help my side of things, but I always try to tell people there is no proof of Bigfoot. There's none.
Right.
Footprints are not proof. Footprints are evidence that supports the theory of the existence of Bigfoot, but it's
Hmm.
not proof. Proof is a body, alive or dead. even DNA, because it's too fallible by humans. The DNA is not proof. It's just, evidence that supports the existence. Same with film and pictures and all that. So up to this point, there is no proof of Bigfoot. And I think that, everyone should be working toward that in a common goal, instead of worrying about, this group believes this, or this group believes this, or this person
Yeah.
doesn't like this person for whatever reason. I think it's all nonsense. And, I have made it a point in the book, and it's something that I do talk about in there as well, to not say anything ill or negative about anybody. I'm not going to do it. I think there's too much of that in the community, people infighting and jealousy. And there are people in the past, if you know anything about it, that disliked my father for whatever reason they had. I don't want anything to do with that. I think it's ridiculous. And I think that, Bigfoot researchers should be working together. It's just something that I want to say. I mean, if you're going to go against the normal acceptance of society and believe in something like Bigfoot, you guys should be banding together. You know what I
Right.
mean? So kind of what I'm doing right now is I'm taking the Blue Mountain evidence, in my dad's evidence, in West Summerlin and Vance Orchard, all the Blue Mountain evidence. We're documenting it, we're cataloging it, we're analyzing it, we're putting it in the database with all the other evidence. And I'm working with Cliff Berrickman, and I'm working with Jeff Meldrum and Doug Hychek. And we're just trying to figure out what consistencies we have. How many animals do we think were present? Do we think these, estimations of how many animals are in the Northwest is correct? Is it accurate? How many recurring casts do we have? How many are male? How many are female? We're just trying to put together everything we can to draw like a plausible conclusion, and see. And, I said earlier that the Blue Mountains are not quite the hot spot that they used to be. And it could be because the guys are not there anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it also could be because they're dying out there. And that's one of the theories I have too, a little bit, because I think, if you'll let me just ramble on here for a minute, hopefully it's interesting. In my father's time during his research, and I'll say from the late 70s to the late 90s, I think what we had there, based on the evidence that I have at hand, okay, and this is my opinion, and it may not be agreeable with everybody else's opinion, it doesn't reflect anyone else's opinion, but it is my opinion based on my experience and the evidence I have, that we had 2 adult females, 1 adult male, and 1 to 2 juveniles. And so I think 4 to 5, I will give the possibility of 6 total Sasquatch in the entire Blue Mountains in
Wow.
a 15 to 20 year period. And if those juveniles, or even a baby, if they're all female or they're all male, there could be a problem eventually, and the male that we have at that time is very elusive. He's by far
Mm-hmm.
the least documented of any of the Sasquatch we have in the Blue Mountains, and he has a
Incredible.
17 to 18-inch print. He's very big, very elusive, and so I'm kind of working on him right now. What is their relationship? Are the females both mates of his? Are they unrelated? Are they sisters? Or is one an older daughter that's growing now and is remaining with the family because there are no other males? These are the kind of things that I'm looking at right now. And, it is a possibility that activity will drop off if it hasn't. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it's something, you know what I'm saying? It's something that's a possibility. But yeah, my opinion there, I get into that a little bit more in the book on why I think some of those things and how I've drawn to that conclusion. But I don't think there's as many as people think there are.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Interesting. I don't have any strong theories around that myself, other than there must be. I don't think that there is a giant population either, just because they're incredibly hard to obviously come across.
Well,
Um,
yeah, but I mean, you're an outdoor guy. How many mountain lions have you seen in your life in
two,
person?
two,
2. Okay,
maybe
and there are
three.
vastly more mountain lions than Sasquatch, right?
Right.
Right. And you've seen some. I've seen one, actually, one. Uh, people can go their whole lives and not even see one of them.
Hmm.
I mean, so there could be more Sasquatch than I think. Maybe there's not. It's
Hmm.
just, but the people that think that, oh, we'd see them if they were there. Okay, well, let's go mountain lion hunting, and we'll see how long it takes, before we even spot one, and
That's
then you
true.
can then you can tell me, right?
That's true. I've seen three bear in my life, three bears and on separate occasions in different locations. And yeah, I can see the analogy there.
Yeah, with a
Yeah.
much larger population than what you'd be looking at in Sasquatch, and a Sasquatch would be, at least we think, highly intelligent, much more intelligent than a cougar or a bear, more like human characteristics and behavior, something that wouldn't want to be seen. It would be almost impossible, to see
Right.
one unless they wanted you to.
Right.
Which brings us back to, not to drag on, sorry, but brings us back to my dad's video, and something that actually points to uh, adding a bit of evidence to the fact that there might be a baby there. Is there's some speculation that that's the only reason that individual stepped out in front of the camera, was to go
Mm.
get that baby out of the tree
Right.
and
Right.
keep it away from my father. So, again, if there is, and I'm not saying there is, but if there is a baby in that footage, that is a very plausible excuse for why it stepped out right in front of him.
Yeah, that makes total sense. That's a very interesting theory. I'd never thought about that. And I'd heard this rumor a long time ago about, you know, she was reaching for a juvenile. So, Michael, last question I have, and this is on the topic of sightings and how and when and why they happen. Um, I saw a quote from your father, or I read it somewhere, and he said something like, "I always see them when." Oh, it was part of his video actually, and he said something about, "I always see them when I'm with myself, not when others are with me." And I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but he said something along those lines, and I was wondering if you have a theory about I don't know how much you believe in Bigfoot's sort of paranormal abilities or sensibilities, that sort of thing. Its ability to pick up on people's intentions or wavelengths. And I don't want to get too woo woo in our chat. And I actually appreciate how scientifically minded you are, and obviously the people that you're working with on this. I'm kind of in the middle. I
Okay.
believe, you know, personally over the years, I've come to believe that I don't know I don't know what Bigfoot is. I think it's biological, but it's a biological specimen. But at the same time, I think there's just a ton of eyewitness accounts and anecdotal evidence of there being something more to it. So when your father says something like that, I always see them when I'm with myself. I'm wondering if you how you feel about this idea that certain people for whatever reason have these experiences. There's a reason or a logic behind that versus it just being random.
Right. Well, let me start by saying that I fully believe 100% organic, living, breathing animal of this
Okay.
planet, some type of ape, or ancestor to man, possibly, missing link type thing. Okay. Um, Fully on that boat. But I will say as well that there are, at least in my life, there are two things, and then that's religion and Bigfoot, that you have to be smart enough to know that you don't know.
Right.
And so even though I believe one way, I am intelligent enough to admit that I don't know, and there could be something paranormal out there. It's not something I normally think about in Bigfoot research, but there are a ton of accounts of it. And I know
Mm.
Mr. Tom Powell believes that something like that is going on, and I invited him to write in my book. So I'm not against that type of thing. Now, first of all, I guess, yes, my father does say that. And he says it in the deduct video. I always see them when I'm by myself.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, number one, that's not true. He saw two of them, one, possibly two, at the same time with my older brother in 1988 before the video.
Wow.
So 4 years prior to it. People ask me about that a lot. And I say, well, he had four sightings. Okay. Three of them by himself, one with my brother, He's excited with the camera in the moment. And he says, oh, I always see him when I'm by myself. He's probably not even thinking about it. Okay. That's why I always tell people, what would you do with the camera and Bigfoot walks out in front of you? Okay. So it's not entirely true. Although, 3 times out of the 4, yes, by himself. The other time with my older brother, who's a family member, his son, maybe that has something to do with it. Also, if you go through my dad's recordings and you listen to them, he talks a lot about when you're with other people, it's different.
Mm-hmm.
And you're not tracking the same that you would if you're by yourself, because you have somebody else there and they have influence as well. Maybe you're talking, you're, moving a little faster, a little slower. Maybe you're both breathing a little harder, and things are just different. And so he actually talks about how he doesn't like to go with other people.
Mm-hmm.
And even though he has the chance to, it's not something he does. And he, did research, and he went with tracks, to look at tracks and make casts and stuff like that with like Wes Summerlin and Dave Bean and Bill Lowry and some of those people and people that he trusted, but not all the time. I mean, those guys were all separate and together at the same time. And my father never took outsiders, like ever. It's just something he didn't do. Um, so I think there's a couple dynamics, to that question. I think that, what he's saying has a point where it's not the same when you're with somebody else. Maybe you're not as quiet. Maybe things are just,
Mm-hmm.
you know, maybe if there are Sasquatch in the area, they're more threatened by 2 people or 3 people,
Right.
where they might show themselves to one person. A lot of it could just be situational. Like, yeah, I stuck my baby in this tree and
Mm-hmm.
now there's this man here. I better go get it. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So, there's all kinds of things that go to there. Or maybe you're right. And maybe they can sense that he's not going to harm them,
Mm-hmm.
because
I
by that point in time, earlier in his life, he, was dead set on killing one.
Interesting.
But by that point in time, well, he was dead set on killing one because he wanted to prove to the world that he wasn't crazy. And he knew that
Right,
was the only
right.
way he was going to do it. But as time went on, every year, every time something happened, he realized they were more and more like us, and he didn't want to shoot one anymore. And by the time he died, he was actually an advocate for just leaving them alone. Like he didn't even
Right.
want to go look anymore. Just leave them alone.
Interesting.
And so maybe they sensed that.
Yeah.
You,
I'm
you
not
know,
positing, yeah, I'm not even saying that I believe that or that's my theory. I was wondering how you felt about that, just because I feel I'm like you. I
yeah.
don't know we don't know what we don't know, and I have an open mind about any sort of abilities that we might not understand.
I will say that he has said that he doesn't think they want to hurt anyone.
Mm-hmm.
And this is part of his audio tapes as well, and I think this will be in the book, that he doesn't think that they want to hurt anyone intentionally, but it doesn't mean that they wouldn't in the right circumstance.
Right.
And famously, during the footage of 92, afterward, he gave an interview where he says in that interview that he had a feeling inside of him that day that he needed to leave, and
Mm-hmm.
that he needed to leave them alone, that they were telling him this is as close as you're going to get for whatever reason it was. And again, that could go back to this whole baby thing keeps popping up in my life lately because it's something we're looking into. But
Mm-hmm.
if he was getting a certain feeling, or if he felt they were being aggressive for some reason that day, maybe that has something to do with it. Interesting enough, he had that feeling. I need to get out of here. Maybe I need to just leave them alone. So last sighting he ever had, he never had a sighting after 92. That was it. So
Interesting.
what we have on footage at Deduct is the last time that he ever saw one.
Unbelievable. Well, Michael, I wanted to thank you again so much for your time. This has been an unbelievable interview, and like I said, I think you and everyone who's worked on the book is doing the community and just the research, the body, really contributing to the body of research around this topic. And I certainly appreciate how seriously you're taking it, and carrying on your father's legacy, who was a pioneer in his own right. So again, thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I appreciate it as well. Uh, thanks for letting me ramble on and tell some
It was
stories.
it
And
was all gold, trust me.
hopefully everyone that listens or whatever has enjoyed it. And I will let you know when the book is actually set to come out, and any pre-order information, anything like that. And hopefully, maybe if you would like, we could get you. We're working on trying to maybe get some autographed copies and turn out something that everyone involved has signed at some point. So maybe we can look into that for you as well. But yeah, I appreciate you having me on. I look forward
Awesome.
to reading.